Jura has officially arrived. This was a pretty obvious guess for most people, but now that Jura's appearance has been 100% confirmed, I'd like to discuss a few points of conflict that I think we should see explored further in this upcoming chapter. If you enjoy this type of discussion, be sure to drop a like and let me know in the comments, and I can do these types of videos more often. First and foremost to discuss is Boruto's conflict with Koji. As we've witnessed ever since chapter 13, there has been a stark contrast between Boruto and Koji's methods, leading to a growing sense of distrust between them. Koji has made it abundantly clear that he doesn't want Boruto to go to the Sand Village, or at least not yet, because if he does, Jura will supposedly kill Boruto, which spells the end of Koji's plan to prevent the worst possible future. However, Boruto doesn't agree with Koji's style, which reflects the old shinobi philosophy that ninja are tools, and the same philosophy that Amado once used with Koji. This means to an end approach resulted in Yodo's death to awaken Sarada's Mangekyo abilities, and was most likely going to sacrifice Konohamaru's life as well, either to prevent Jura from killing Boruto, or perhaps for some other unknown purpose. This conflict eventually boiled over in chapter 21. As a result of Koji's constant lies and withholding of information, much like Amado, Boruto was driven to disobey Koji's orders, teleporting to the Sand Village to save Konohamaru's life. Understandably, Koji was extremely worried about this, because as shown in this sneak peek spoiler, Jura did in fact show up like Koji said. This brings me to my first point. Someone has to be wrong. As we know, Boruto is very much alive and well in the flash forward scene that still hasn't happened yet, so Boruto definitely can't die for good anytime soon. This leads us to 8 possibilities. One is that Koji was lying about Jura killing Boruto here. 2 is that Koji was flat out wrong about Jura killing Boruto here. 3 is that Boruto will die, but he'll immediately be brought back to life just like chapter 67, to the point that it doesn't even matter that he died in the first place. 4 is that Boruto dies and is immediately brought back, but Koji is worried about future consequences that result from this event, such as if Boruto had only one free revival that was meant to be used later on, but will now be forced to use immediately. And within option 4, there are 3 sub-options. 4A is that Koji is just wrong, and it ultimately doesn't matter that Boruto does this. 4B is that Boruto will now die in the future no matter what, whereas he would have lived a full life otherwise, but Boruto trusts Kawaki, Mitsuki, and Sarada to finish things and save the world, whereas Koji does not. 4C is that Koji's original plan was nearly foolproof and almost guaranteed to save the world, but now that Boruto has gone to the Sand Village and will be killed by Jura, he will have to switch to plan B, which is far less likely to succeed. Option 1 also has 3 sub-options. 1A is that Koji lied because he has ulterior motives. 1B is that Koji lied to Boruto for pretty much the same reasons as 4B. Boruto will now die in the future no matter what, and Koji doesn't trust Kawaki, Mitsuki, and Sarada to finish things and save the world without Boruto's help. 1C is that Koji lied to Boruto for pretty much the same reason as 4C. He had an original plan that was nearly foolproof, which required Boruto not to go to the Sand Village, but now that Boruto has shown up, Koji has to switch to plan B, which is far less likely to succeed. Obviously, not all of these are equally likely to happen, but I do think they're all plausible. However, I'm gonna go ahead and rule out option 3, because that is the dumbest turn of events they could possibly do and will borderline make me want to drop the series. Momoshiki literally said he can't revive Boruto the way he did in chapter 67 ever again, and if he can revive Boruto over and over again, there's really no need to be worried about Boruto dying or tangling with Kawaki like he says in chapter 76. And if Koji can just revive Boruto over and over again via whatever plan they come up with, there's really no need to worry about Boruto dying in the first place. This fear only makes sense if Boruto can't be revived, or if he can only be revived once. I'm also not a huge fan of option 2, because if Koji is just flat out wrong now, then there's no reason to ever trust Koji in the future. Every bad prediction about a main character is probably not coming true. This just opens the door for the most plot-convenient, anticlimactic drop of conflict at every twist and turn, and unless Koji is secretly evil, we're not gonna care about his character or plans anymore. This same thing applies to option 4A. It's merely delaying the inevitable. This leaves us with the other 5 possibilities, all of which I think are interesting and can serve the narrative in an engaging way. And technically, options 1B, 1C, 4B, and 4C are all the same thing. The only difference is that in 4B and 4C, Koji misled Boruto without directly lying, because in this scenario, he would have seen that Boruto dies and comes back to life, but only told Boruto that he would die in order to deter him from going to the Sand Village, whereas in options 1B and 1C, he'd just be directly lying. However, I think options 1B and 1C are the easiest ones to implement without being contrived, because depending on how Boruto is hypothetically revived, it can either be really cool and impactful, or make no sense like Momoshiki in chapter 67. By contrast, it's really hard to write Koji's lie in a contrived way. Either way though, this idea parallels Amado nicely. It adds tension because Koji is lying to Boruto, or at least withholding information, and it makes the reader much more suspicious of Koji and interested in his exact intentions. All of these point towards the same general idea, it just boils down to the very specific execution of Koji's misdirection. The exception is if Koji simply has ulterior motives, which could be interesting, but I think that's probably the least likely as of right now. If I had to choose an option as my favorite, I'd probably go with options 1B or 1C. Koji lied, but now that Boruto has shown up, there will be consequences. For example, maybe Moegi won't be saved now. Maybe more people will die or become trees. Maybe the chances of defeating the Shinju at all have plummeted greatly. In this manner, Boruto did make a mistake. However, this doesn't mean the world's gonna end. Koji said it himself in chapter 4. It doesn't really change anything. We still must fight. Shinobi are those who endure. Even if Boruto did make a mistake, they must keep moving forward. They must do the best they can and never give up. This is thematically relevant to both the Naruto and Boruto stories, and based on Koji's dialogue in chapter 4, this is the type of mindset they should adopt. However, that doesn't mean Boruto and Koji won't argue over Boruto's decision, as it actively put their mission at risk. That said, Koji isn't exempt from blame either. He just got done revealing to Boruto that Yodo's sacrifice was always part of the plan to awaken Sarada's new powers, much to Boruto's disgust, and he's constantly emphasizing the fact that Boruto will die by Jura's hand. But Boruto doesn't fear death. He was ready to sacrifice his life for Sasuke's in the Kawaki arc. He was resolved to have Sasuke kill him if Momoshiki took over in the Kawaki and Code arcs. He put himself in grave danger against the Shinju in chapter 4. He told Kawaki to kill him if Momoshiki ever takes over again in chapter 15, and he ignored Koji's warning and saved Konohamaru in chapter 21. He's also shown a tendency to let his emotions get the better of him, causing him to make rash decisions, such as when he stayed to fight Hidari in chapter 4 even after the plan was called off. Obviously, Koji recognizes these flaws and is trying to work around them by withholding information and giving warnings, but he's not doing the best job, and that may be due to his own assumptions about Boruto's character. When it comes to his own life, Boruto will sacrifice everything to save the world or his friends, but when it comes to his friends' lives, all of that goes out the window. Even Yodo's got him all high-strung. Yodo! Bro's probably never even spoken to her in his whole life. Koji seems to think Boruto is like him, or at least that he has the potential to be like him. A shinobi tool, someone who will put his emotions aside for the greater good. Boruto may act all cool, calm, and composed like Sasuke, but he's not Sasuke. In this regard, he's more like Naruto. He would never sacrifice a friend for the greater good. He would fight endlessly to save both his friends and the greater good. That's just who he is. That's why Koji's warnings aren't working so smoothly, and that's why his lies and withholding of information has backfired, because now Boruto knows Koji will mislead him, and he knows it too early. By contrast, if Koji had said, "Boruto, the chances of Konohamaru surviving here are high, and if he does survive, he's almost guaranteed to survive in the future. However, if you save Konohamaru now, while he will survive in the short term, Jura will definitely kill him in the long run, because he'll be enraged by you stepping in to kill Matsuri and preventing her from defeating her target on her own." That might have convinced Boruto. I'm not saying it definitely would have worked, but I think the chances would have been higher because in this hypothetical, Koji is appealing to Boruto's desire to save his friends rather than his desire to save the world, which we know to be weaker than his desire to protect his friends. I'm not saying it's bad writing that Koji didn't take this approach. In fact, it's a good thing he didn't, but it is a character flaw, and character flaws are a good thing. When they make sense anyway. As far as this Boruto and Koji dynamic goes, we don't need to get an answer to all of this in this particular chapter, but the topic needs to be explored. Even simple internal dialogue would do the trick. Anything that gives us some insight into Koji's intentions. Moving away from Boruto and Koji, let's talk about Jura now. As I discussed in my recent video analyzing each of the Shinju and their internal goals when it comes to their targets, Jura had a noticeable emotional reaction to the situation involving Matsuri and Konohamaru. He literally shed a tear, making him and Matsuri the first Shinju to cry. As a result, Jura might be more emotionally invested than ever before, possibly prompting him to take drastic action. He might target Boruto more seriously than last time, though Boruto can't actually die for good. He might target Konohamaru to finish Matsuri's mission in her honor. He might target Boruto's friends to get revenge. He might bring Hidari or Momoshiki with him to help retrieve Matsuri and Ryu's Thorn Souls or help dispose of their enemies. Anything goes, really. To be honest, I really just want Momoshiki to show up so we can see Eida and freak her out, pitting Eida against Koji for previously saying that Momoshiki wouldn't show up, and hopefully Momoshiki can have a cool last fight with Boruto or Mitsuki. That said, I do have some concerns. Based on Jura's shitty reason for leaving in chapter 13, we might not get any of this stuff with Jura or Momoshiki. From a narrative perspective, there's no issues with what I'm about to explain, but from a plot perspective, we'll likely find ourselves either at a contradiction or another anticlimactic finale. I plan to make a video delving deeper into this topic, but to be extremely brief, Jura doesn't want to kill Boruto. Much like his targets, he finds any and every excuse to disobey his instinctual goals and tentails, largely due to his curiosity in others, including Boruto. As a result, he will take any opportunity he can to spare Boruto's life, or at least to delay his inevitable death. In chapter 13, his excuse was Hidari rotting. Plot-wise, that was a terrible excuse that made no sense, but narratively, this facilitates Jura's contradiction. However, if Jura does anything other than grab Ryu and Matsuri's Thorn Souls and immediately leave, we will have reached a contradiction and will be forced to ask ourselves, why didn't Jura do this last time? We won't be able to use the same narrative contradiction excuse anymore, since that narrative still applies to Jura even now. Conversely, if Jura does use that excuse again, then we'll have reached another pretty anticlimactic arc finale again. Yes, Koji's lie makes things interesting, much more so than last time, but it's still pretty anticlimactic. We spent all this arc hyping up Jura's arrival if and when Boruto shows up, only for it to mean almost nothing. Cause let's be real, who cares if Jura takes back Ryu and Matsuri's Thorn Souls? Nobody's gonna miss Shinki or Moegi, who were never even in the story to begin with. That said, a cool idea that could mitigate most of these problems would be if Code showed up and pretended to save Boruto, when in reality he's there to plant a claw mark on him so we can find Boruto's accomplice, and Jura leaves because he realizes Code's plan. That would actually be really freaking cool for Code's character. It pays off his scene in chapter 15, and it gives Jura an actual reason to leave plot-wise, since Jura actually wants the accomplice dead. Of course, Boruto might notice the claw mark eventually like Shikamaru did in chapter 68, but given that all those Leaf Jonin didn't notice the claw marks on their necks in chapter 1 of 2 Blue Vortex, it's possible Code has improved his claw marks in some way in order to make them less noticeable when he plants them on other people, or perhaps that was a byproduct of getting the Luminars removed, meaning Boruto might not necessarily notice if Code does this, or if he does it to someone else like Sarada. He could also come up with a unique strategy to pull this trick off. However he does it, doing so would amplify the tension because now Koji really would be in danger of being killed off, since Kawaki's not there right now to shrink the claw marks. This either means Boruto will have to notice the claw mark and avoid Koji until Kawaki gets a chance to shrink it, or Koji will be in danger every time Boruto goes near him. That said, They've been building up a Koji vs Amado dynamic lately, so I feel like Koji can't die until he and Amado meet face to face, or at least clash strategies more directly. Regardless, that's my best solution to end this arc in the coolest and least contrived way, but I don't actually expect this to happen, unfortunately. It's more likely that we'll run into one of the problems I explained earlier. Similarly, I don't really expect much from Hidari either. Sarada already had her big moment against Ryu and is now passed out, and Boruto already fought Hidari all out and defeated him, albeit with a little help, so what's the point in bringing back Hidari now? Sarada didn't even think back to his question about her identity when she had her big identity acceptance moment. I don't even want Hidari to show up anymore. I'd genuinely rather just see Momoshiki do something for once. Just him seeing Eida will literally make my day. I'd also like to see Mitsuki do something useful for once, but today's not a Mitsuki rant video. Anyway though, that covers my thoughts and expectations for chapter 22, so let me know what you think in the comments. What do you expect from Boruto and Koji's conflict? Of the 8 possible reasons I gave for Koji to be wrong about Jura killing Boruto, which option do you think is the most likely, and which option do you think would be best for the story? What do you expect from Jura in this chapter? Do you think he'll leave under the excuse of Ryu and Matsuri rotting? Will he come up with a different excuse? Or will he actually try to kill Boruto? Do you think Hidari and Momoshiki will make a move? And what are some other predictions you have for this chapter? Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications for future videos. And if you think I'm completely wrong about everything, feel free to let me know in the comments. Either way, thanks for watching.